Welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many of you interested in wetlands and illegal killing of birds in wetlands. We have a stellar panel today. Welcome, everybody. As Sarah said, I'm Patricia Šarić. I'm the Chief Executive of BirdLife International. And I'm delighted to have all of these great people from the BirdLife team and the BirdLife partnership joining us to talk about a very important topic on celebration of World Water Day yesterday, but also looking into the future of birds and wetlands. Today we have Iván Ramírez, Senior Head of Conservation for BirdLife in the European team. And he's gonna get us started and then we'll go from there to Cyprus to talk about the situation of illegal killing in wetlands in Cyprus. Martin Hellicar, the Chief Executive of BirdLife in Cyprus, will join us and share his wisdom with us. And then last but definitely not least, we will have Ivana, Šarić, Kapelj from BIOM, the BirdLife partner in Croatia, sharing some of the great stuff that the BirdLife team has been doing there. So as Sarah said, please post your questions and answers. We will be answering them in the Q&A box. It's lovely to see people from South Africa and Ireland, the Netherlands, Albania, the BirdLife partner, in the US, looking at, there's people from DC and North Carolina and Maryland, and lovely to see so many of you joining us. Thank you so much. So without further ado, let me pass it on to the people who really know about this. And we're going to start with Iván. Iván, take it on.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Thank you and welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm really glad to be here with you talking today about wetlands and the problem of illegal killing. So, as Patricia just said, today we are going to be linking two issues that are actually in everybody's news. We had recently, less than a month ago, the World Wetlands Day. It was Water Day recently as well. Illegal killing, unfortunately, is one of the top threats in our region, but also worldwide. What I'm going to do today is to present you both the key facts and figures about wetlands, but also what is the level of impact of illegal killing in our, well, I will be focusing in our region, but I would say that this is actually a general problem. So as Patricia said, I work as Senior Head of Conservation for Europe and Central Asia. And first, some facts. And I took the opportunity of showing you one of my favorite sites near where I live. This is a wetland. And I just wanted to know, how much do you know about wetlands? Because maybe you didn't know this, but globally, they occupy an area that is equal to Canada. So it doesn't really matter where you attending this webinar from, but more certainly you do have a wetland that is really close to your place. It could be rice fields, it could be a coastal wetland, it could be a reservoir, but you will probably have a natural, ideally, wetland around you. Now, the bad news is that they have reduced their size over 35% since 1970. And this is actually probably an underestimation because we do lack quite a lot of data, especially from some continents, such as in Asia or Africa, for example. And another thing that maybe you didn't know is that this is 3 times the rate of forest loss. So you probably have heard about the Amazon forest or about the Indonesian forest. Well, the truth is that wetlands are disappearing even faster than that. So we need to do something, and we need to do it now. Otherwise, it will be too late. A quarter of all wetland-dependent species are in decline. I will give you some more details later about this. But again, this helps you to understand what is the size of the problem that we are facing at the moment. And of course, the key element of a wetland, the water, well, the water quality is going down the drain, if I might say as well. You know, the trends are negative worldwide for many reasons that I will explain. So the situation is definitely suboptimal. If I were to list to you the key threats, you can see them in this slide. Definitely, we do have agricultural runoff. We do think about many wetlands that are surrounded by agricultural fields, and you have a lot of runoff with a lot of phosphates and nitrates, for example, that are deteriorating the quality of the water. You have drainage, you have salinity increases, many times because of rising water levels, also sea level. Illegal killing, this is the area that we are going to be focusing today. urbanization, and of course, climate change, which is just taking all these factors and making it worse, if I might say. So if we look quickly into the 3 different types of habitats, and these are pictures from wetlands in the Mediterranean, you can see that if I were to compare terrestrial with marine and with freshwater habitats are really the ones that are doing the worst in terms of, well, the index value, as we call the living index. This is data from WWF and BLI together. So that gives you again a picture about the deterioration over the years. If we were to consider the biodiversity, that is the species that are linked to these wetlands, you can see that in this left side of the chart, the quality of the wetlands in the Mediterranean has been going down until more or less 2005, where we had a bit of a rebound. But if you see here down, you will see that most of that rebound only applies to one group of species, the birds. We have invested a lot of money, a lot of resources in waterbird populations, and they are going, let's say, a bit better over the years. But amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and fish species are still declining heavily. This is also the situation on this right-hand side of the slide for the percentage of threatened species. You can see that mollusks, fish, amphibians have, a big amount of their species that are globally threatened. So these are pristine areas that need really urgent conservation action. And the other thing that I mentioned in the first slide is water, of course. And the truth is that our wetlands are becoming less wet, if I might say. They are receiving less and less water over the years. This is again data from the Mediterranean area, where you can see that the amount of water that arrives to the wetlands is decreasing over the time because of all the reasons that I mentioned before. But as you can imagine, this will have a direct impact on the quality of the habitats and on the species that need these habitats. If you put that together with climate change, with global climate change, well, the situation, of course, is not optimal. This picture again shows you the amount of species that will suffer from climate change linked to wetland areas. And you can see that most of Iberia, North Africa, the Balkan Peninsula, the Balkan states, Turkey, the Middle East will be severely affected by climate change. And I'm talking only about wetland species. So if I take those threats and then we focus on the one that we are going to be talking today, which is illegal killing, you will see that if we were to rank all the different threats that are affecting species, the sites, and particularly the wetlands, hunting and trapping, that maybe you can see here in this slide, appears as the 4th one, okay? While we have human disturbance, invasive species, and agriculture, all of them will be cumulative. But I want us to focus today on illegal killing. And this is the picture, the rather shocking picture that probably you have seen. And if you're not, I will show you now where you can find it. This is data compiled by BirdLife International over the years. This is part of a report that we published in 2015 that tells us that only in this region, on average, 25 million birds are being illegally killed per year. And let me repeat this again, 25 million birds. You can see some of the countries that actually will be talking after my presentation, Cyprus or Croatia, with astonishing numbers. You can see that there are many species that are being affected and that this happens almost everywhere in the region. And this is the size of the problem that we are facing. Please remember that wetlands are not only important just because of the ecosystem services that they provide, because of the cultural links, they are also fundamental areas for migratory species. They are stopover sites, they are breeding sites for many species that will be crossing from Africa to Europe, north and south. And without them, we will be losing them. Whenever they stop in these wetlands, if they are being illegally killed, you can imagine the scale of the problem. I have only 2 slides to finish my presentation, which are about what it is that we are doing against this. Well, of course, first of all, we need to understand the size of the problem. And for that, BirdLife is really working. And I would say probably we are leaders in understanding the size of the problem. These are some of the reports that we've been publishing over the past years. They are all freely available on the internet. You can find them just by Googling them. In 2015, we published the Killing Report. In 2017, a new version with additional countries, Northern Europe and the Caucasus and Central Europe. And also recently, we expanded the study to the Arabian Peninsula, Iran and Iraq. And these graphs, you can find them also in our publications. You can quickly find them in our website, but it gives you the amount of, the numbers of illegally killed birds per country, what are the key groups that are being affected, what are the leaders of these negative ranks, if I might say. But I mean, once that we know the size of the problem, we need to put solutions. And my one before the last slide is about what are we doing to address this. I really want to call the attention to the enormous amount of work that our partners in BirdLife International, but also others supporting us are doing addressing this threat. You probably have heard about the Flight for Survival campaign that we launched last year and that we are about to relaunch again this year. That tells you the story of the migratory species on their trips from Central Africa to Northern Europe and backwards, where you can see all the different threats that they are facing, but also, you know, nice stories of conservation and positive outcomes. You have probably seen and maybe are related to national law enforcement agencies in almost every country where we are working with them to address this, to basically attack all these offenders and put them under the court. And we, you know, the vast consortium of other entities that are supporting us, and I'm here just showing some of them, you know, from IUCN to the MAVA Foundation to Tour de Vala to the Mediterranean Wetlands Alliance that we are being part of, key organizations that are fundamental in working together to address this threat. So that's basically my key message. You know, they are fantastic and important areas under a lot of pressure, but also where we are finding solutions. And before I give it to my colleagues, I just wanted to say that please listen to them because we have amazing stories coming out from both our partners in Croatia and in Cyprus. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Iván, for setting up the regional vision of this. I wanted to add, if you go to the BirdLife website, and I'll ask Sarah to put the link for you all, you can download the publications, not only from the Mediterranean, but also we are doing the same for Asia right now, being led by Dingley and others in that team. Yeah, so with that, let's pass it on to Cyprus. Martin Hellicar, the Chief Executive of BirdLife Cyprus, is going to guide us through what has been happening there, some of the gruesome situation of the killing of birds in Cyprus, but also great hope about what we have been able and what you guys have been able to change in terms of the tide of illegal killing. Martin, take it on.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Thank you, Iván, for setting the scene so well. And thanks to Sarah for pulling all this together. I always find it a little bit strange talking on Zoom where you can't see your audience, but there we are. This is the new reality. So what I wanted to talk to you briefly about here is a particular wetland in Cyprus called Paralimni, which is an example of the kind of challenges we face in Cyprus in trying to tackle both the aspects of illegal bird killing that Iván highlighted so well, and Cyprus, as you'll have seen from what Iván showed you, really does have a big problem in that area, but also the aspects of trying to protect wetland sites, well, Natura 2000 sites in general, IBAs in general, but in particular wetland sites. And this is a classic example of the challenges we face. Paralimni, by the way, the literal translation means by the lake. So one of the things we've been trying to promote with the local community, you can see it's not a small community, it's a huge community and a growing community in the background next to the lake, is that they should be more proud of the lake, that is their lake, that gives the community its name, rather than using it as a dumping ground and trying to find ways to develop it. So Cyprus, as you probably know, is a pretty dry island. We have an average annual rainfall of just 50 centimeters. With that corner of the Mediterranean that doesn't get a lot of rain. Nonetheless, we do have some wetlands. This map here, this Google Earth grab, shows you the 7 remaining natural wetlands on the island. The best known ones are the two salt lakes, so one at Larnaca here and one at Limassol. But there are some other important lakes, and one of them is Paralimni Lake here in the southeast corner that I want to talk about. But I've also put on this map Oroklini Lake, its neighbor just to the west, which I will come back to later. So obviously, these few wetlands are really important for us, not just for some key breeding birds, but in particular on migration for the flood of birds that are coming through our island right now as we speak. So homing in on Paralimni Lake, the map on the left there shows you the boundaries of the important bird area that we defined following well-known BirdLife International criteria, while the map on the right shows you what has been designated as an SPA, as a Natura 2000 site for birds. The missing bit is this bit that I've highlighted rather crudely with a red arrow there. That was left out because it is planned for development. This bit of the lake here has already been built on. There's people living within the lake bed there. That's been reclaimed and built on, though it floods when we have a wet year like this year. And the plan is to build this. The permits were given for this. It hasn't happened because of the financial crisis, but the plans are still there to build on that. So that's the first problem, if you like it. The first challenge in trying to manage this lake is that it's not at the boundaries it should be, not at least in terms of legal protection. Why is this an IBA? Why is this designated as a Natura 2000 site? Well, the key species are the ones you see there, the spur-winged lapwing, which breeds in good numbers there, and the black-winged stilt, an impressive photo from the lake there, which breeds in very good numbers in good years. The levels of water on the lake vary very much from year to year, and it's very seasonal. But in good years like this, I think the latest count suggests we have maybe up to 40 pairs of black-winged stilts. But it's not just an SPA, it's not just a Natura 2000 site for birds, it's also the most important site in Cyprus for our endemic grass snake, which you see a picture of there. So it is designated for that as well. That's the good news, if you like. The bad news is what I've tried to capture here with all the threats that Paralimni faces, which basically boil down to diggers, things like this. But there's also go-kart areas being used. You can see it on the map there, go-kart pieces within the lake, development encroaching from all sides, fly tipping. But when I say fly tipping, it's on quite an impressive scale. We're talking about building rubble being dumped there. Water management is a key aspect, as it is for all wetlands. In this particular wetland, apart from the seasonality, which is going to change because of climate change, and that's a big threat, we also have the aspect which is particular to this lake, that because part of it is being built, there's a constant pressure to drain the lake and drain it early so that people don't have to live with mosquitoes. So there's a lot of irregular draining of the lake that goes on, and that's a real challenge we have to face. But on top of all that, and of particular importance for Paralimni Lake, is the pressure that the lake suffers in terms of shooting, both legal and illegal. Before homing in on that aspect for the lake, I wanted to take a look at illegal bird killing in Cyprus in general, because we have some good news. The graph you see there in the center of that picture is based on our systematic monitoring of use of illegal mist nets for trapping migrant birds to feed what is a very lucrative illegal industry in Cyprus. These are sold as delicacies in restaurants, still fetch very high prices. But you can see that if we take the baseline of 100, when we started with the support of BirdLife partners like RSPB, NABU, who's since coming as well, of 100, we're now at 6%. So we're talking about a 94% reduction in use of nets. It's a real success story. Great news for migrant birds. We still have some issues with lime sticks, and we still have some relaxations in the law with lime sticks that we're fighting hard. But still, the overall picture is one of transforming Cyprus from a terrible black spot for illegal killing to, a place where we're hopeful looking forward. Back to Paralimni Lake, and the issue there we have is more shooting, as I said. The little map there is an extract from the hunting maps for the island, and 60% of the lake is actually open for shooting in November and December. The shooting is both legal, so things like ducks, but also illegal, such as in the case of this flamingo. It's hard to mistake a flamingo for a duck, so this is not accidental. There's also illegal shooting the rest of the year. Unfortunately, this part of Cyprus is a real hotbed for illegality. Well, illegality in general, actually, but illegality to do with shooting as well. The other thing that, of course, the shooting brings with it is lead shot. We all know that partly because of BirdLife pressure, there's been a ban on use of lead shot near wetlands across Europe. This was actually in effect even before this happened in Cyprus. So strictly speaking, since 2003 it hasn't been allowed, but there's no implementation of this. And in the case of Paralimni Lake, we have an additional threat, which I've tried to show in this little picture here, which is that there is actually a clay pigeon shooting range, so a training range, a sport range within the lake, and lead shot is used in that clay pigeon range. So we have a huge load of lead shot within the sediment. We've had a number of cases of flamingos being poisoned, and flamingos are the birds you find being poisoned. Doubtless there are other species that are not so easy to detect. That shooting range is there even though Cyprus is actually being condemned in the European Court for failing to properly manage Paralimni Lake. And one of the things the European Court highlighted was the need to find an alternative site for the lake. Nonetheless, today it's still there. What are we doing about this? Well, we're shouting about it in the media, and it has good traction. The last couple of years, our stories on this, whether it's in social media or with press releases, have really caught the imagination. We've had a lot of TV coverage, radio coverage, which is great. Behind the scenes, we're lobbying hard. Our position at the moment on this issue is that the shooting in this lake should close unless the government can actually show, one, that they can stop the use of lead shot, and two, that they can stop poaching. So we're pushing hard on that. Let's add a positive note. Sometimes we have some little success stories. This one is another case of dumping on the lake, and through persistent pressure, especially from my colleague Andrea, who you see looking happy in that picture, this actually got cleared up. Problem solved? No, but you know, these little successes help us keep up the fight in these things. Bigger picture, well, I mentioned Oroklini earlier and showed it on the map because I wanted to bring that as an example of what can be done with proper management of wetlands, even in a place that's so keen on development like Cyprus. Oroklini is a smaller site than Paralimni, but very important. Before we got involved, the vision the local community had was, sorry, that's my timer. The vision the local community had was to develop it. But through a LIFE project, they've come on side, and now they're actually proud of this being a protected lake. And we in Cyprus are really happy that this is actually being used as an example of a good restoration practice in the latest BirdLife campaign to promote restoration. So it can be done. Another reason to be hopeful going forward is this big 10-year LIFE integrated project called LIFE IP Theses, which involves all the relevant government departments, academics, consultancies, and NGOs, and its target is the management of Natura 2000 sites, and the particular area that we'll be working on through this is in fact Paralimni Lake. So there are reasons going forward to hope that we can tackle all the various threats, including the illegal shooting on the lake. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. That was fantastic, and indeed, very hard to confuse a flamingo with a duck. That was a great point. It's great to see all the progress, and it's good to see that there's some very significant reduction in the use of mist nets. Unfortunately, the limestick practice that is so cruel still up there, but great progress nonetheless. All right, let's move into Croatia. And let me invite Ivana, who leads the protected area program of BIOM of the BirdLife partner in Croatia, to share with us all the great stuff that we have been able to do there thanks to you guys. Ivana, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for a chance to present at this webinar, a part of the work my home institution is doing. So today I'm going to talk to you about the Neretva Delta area, which is a very important area for biodiversity in Croatia. And I'm going to share with you what my home institution is doing, what are the efforts to tackle poaching in a maze of reed beds. So first, I'm just going to shortly introduce this area to you so you can visualize it. Afterwards, I'm going to say something about illegal killing of birds in the Neretva Delta area. Then I'm going to speak about our anti-poaching activities. And in the end, just give you an insight into our future planned activities, because unfortunately, our work there is not done yet. So first, maybe just to give a personal perspective of my own of Neretva Delta to you. So about 6 years ago, when I started working in BiOM, one of my first tasks was to go to Neretva Delta with my colleague, who is an ornithologist, and help him with bird monitoring there. I was really thrilled about this chance because I have really good childhood memories from Neretva Delta because my grandmother is born in a village nearby and I used to spend my summers there. So I was really happy to visit the area again. Unfortunately, when we got to the ornithological reserves in Neretva Delta, we could not hear any birds at all. The only sound we could hear were actually illegal shots coming from that reserve. And I was actually a bit in shock about the scope of illegal killing of birds happening there. And this changed a bit my perspective of the area. So just maybe you can visualize the area. So the Neretva Delta is in the southernmost part of Croatia. It's a densely populated area, and it has these three natural zones, which are very important for birds. The first one are the reed beds in the Neretva Delta, which are surrounded by karst hills. This is the largest reed bed complex in Croatia. And then we also have the coastal sea, where the Neretva River meets the Adriatic Sea. All of these habitats are very important for birds, especially the ones migrating through the Adriatic flyway. And this is a very important wintering, nesting, and resting site for them. The Neretva Delta has 6 ornithological reserves. It's proclaimed as a Ramsar area and is also designated as a Natura 2000 site. Unfortunately, although it's a very important wetland in Croatia, it's also the worst black spot for poaching in Croatia. Birds are illegally killed there in extensive numbers each year, and the species that's most affected by this poaching is the coot. You can see a photo of a coot on the slide. And another thing is that the pattern of poaching that goes on there is quite difficult to control and quite unique. So poaching mostly happens during night. It happens in a maze of reed beds in the ornithological reserves, and it happens on the sea. All of this is illegal in Croatia, and law enforcement officers are not that motivated to catch perpetrators because it's very complex to monitor this terrain, and often poachers are even better equipped than the police. Hunting is also a tradition in the area. There are a lot of hunters, and half of all game species are birds. And hunting in that wetland is okay, but when it's aligned with the law. So to see the evidence of poaching in Neretva Delta, you don't have to physically go there. You can just open Google Maps or any other browser and see these man-made poaching ponds in the reed beds. These poaching ponds are connected with channels to the mainland, and they are basically a death trap for birds. Poachers use bird collars on the ponds and illegally shoot birds during night. This is just a close-up of such a poaching pond, and on the right picture here you can see that this truly is a maze of reed beds and agricultural plots, and that the perpetrators can easily just hide from the police in any of these channels. Illegal killing of birds also happens in the shallow coastal sea. These are some scenes you can see during the day, which are idyllic scenes of Neretva Delta. However, you can also see the evidence of poaching from the night before. So we acknowledged as an organization that there is a big problem happening in Neretva Delta, and we were lucky enough to get funds for the Adriatic Flyway project from the MAVA Foundation in Your Own Nature. And at the beginning of that project, we sat down with the main stakeholders to tackle illegal killing of birds in Neretva Delta. Those were the hunters, the police, the inspection, the public institution that manages the protected areas there, and local NGOs. The hunters, they acknowledged that the problem of poaching is happening in Neretva Delta, And they even cited some of their members saying things like, if my father could fly, he would die. But at the same time, they decided to back off and say that poaching is happening in protected areas and that we should actually tackle it with the police inspection and public institution. And so we did. We organized the first anti-poaching camps in Croatia. And early on in our work concerning tackling illegal killing of birds, we realized that, that as an NGO, we have the role to actually build capacity of government institutions that should be working on this topic and solving it, and that we should be a facilitator to get these institutions to cooperate. So we gathered the police, the public institution working in the area, and even the fire brigade. And along with them, we monitored illegal killing of birds, conducted some anti-poaching actions, and dismantled illegal hunting hides in the poaching ponds in the reserves. So for our anti-poaching action, the most important date was 6 December 2017, so almost 4 years ago. And that was the first time where we had a coordinated action with inspection, public institution, and police. And we were actually split into 2 teams and monitored with them the reed beds in Neretva Delta and the river mouth. And the result of this first one joint action was that 3 poachers were caught in that area. This really motivated the law enforcement officers, and maybe even a bigger result for us is that we found 3 trustworthy police officers in the area who are motivated to tackle illegal killing of birds, and we cooperate with them to this day. When it comes to dismantling illegal hunting hides, there were a lot of poaching hides in the ornithological reserves, and we actually dismantled them with the public institution that manages the area. And in these 4 years that we have been working together, we dismantled all known hunting hides, which is 14 of them. And since then, the poaching activities have really decreased in the ornithological reserves. For some time, the poaching was not even a threat to birds there. Unfortunately, some new hides were built, but then the government institutions said, okay, let's tear them down. And we as an NGO helped them with manpower, equipment, and knowledge, but they organized this. So when we went to dismantle our first poaching hide, we had this illusion that these poaching hides are, poorly built, can be torn down in 10 minutes, and so on. We actually were in for a surprise, because the first poaching hide we encountered was actually a poaching weekend house. It was really a solid structure. It even had an agricultural plot next to it. And actually dismantling this hide took all day. We also found evidence of poaching in that hide, and we even found a mixtape of Croatian folk music. So it was really interesting for us to, see what's inside of these poaching hides. The other ones were smaller. This was really the biggest one. And we didn't throw away the material from which the poaching hides were built from. We used this wood for our educational activities, and along with local children actually made bird feeders with them. So this something that was once threatening to birds now actually became something that can help the birds. Unfortunately, as I said, our work there is far from done. Neretva still is the biggest black spot for poaching in Croatia, and the black spot on Neretva Delta for poaching is this lagoon you can see on the picture here. It's called the Parila Lagoon. It's on the coast, and poaching really happens extensively there. This truly is a maze of reed beds. So there are a lot of agricultural plots, and the police, the inspection, the public institution, and us, we still haven't found a way how to successfully catch perpetrators there. And the scope of illegal killing of birds is enormous there. So we had a small victory in the ornithological reserves, but this Parila Lagoon, it still remains an issue. But just maybe to end with an optimistic note, if you remember, at the beginning of my story, I told you that I couldn't hear any birds in the ornithological reserves in Neretva Delta. Well, a few years after our anti-poaching actions began, I went back there with my colleague to help him monitor birds, and I heard some sounds. I'm not an ornithologist, so I said, oh, those are illegal bird callers, they are poaching again. But my colleague actually told me, no, those are real birds you can hear in the ornithological reserves. And I cannot tell you how motivational it was to me to, like see the direct consequences of our anti-poaching work. I can finally hear birds in the ornithological reserves, and it serves its purpose. So that's it from me. I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to thank actually the whole team in BiOM. I'm just representing a small amount of people working on this issue, not only from BiOM, but from government institutions that cooperate with us there. CABS also helped us as an NGO to tackle poaching there. And yeah, thank you to all of them.
Thank you so much, Ivana. It's fantastic to hear the progress. And yeah, I mean, it's magical when you give nature a chance, how it actually comes back. So I'm happy to see that you were able to hear some of the birds and see them after all of these great measures have been taken. Okay, we're going to start the question and answer session. And thank you so much to all of you who have already put fantastic questions on the Q&A box. Please keep them coming. I do want to take this time to thank all of the great donors that have enabled not only BirdLife as the Secretariat, but the team of the partners to be able to move this along. I would like to highlight a couple of donors who have helped us in the Mediterranean, including the MAVA Foundation, the Oak Foundation, SEGRE, and some of the individual donors who are actually incredibly convinced that we can't end and put an end to the illegal killing of birds in wetlands. And let me mention Mark Constantine and Tassel Leventis in particular. So let's go into the question. So why don't we start by clarifying why people are illegally killing birds? There are a couple of questions about whether, why on earth are we killing coots? And why if it's illegal, why is it actually happening? So can we start at the beginning? And I don't know if Iván, we can start with you, and then Martin and Ivana, you guys can jump in from your own perspectives on your countries. But why is it happening?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thanks, Patricia. And this is, I have to say, of all the different presentations that I've given over the years about this topic, I would say probably this is the one that always comes first. Everybody understands that this is horrible, yet it still happens. And what science says to us is that there are several reasons for this to happen. What we have to date is that you have recreational purposes. You might like it or not, but for some people, this is part of leisure activity, let's say. You can call it sports to an extent, but not the illegal killing. But for some of them, shooting birds is part of a sport. Definitely, there is an issue with trade, especially in North Africa and some other regions in the world where, the illegal trapping, if not killing, but the trapping of birds has a direct link with illegal trade of species. And to an extent, there is a cultural link to it. We do have some parts in the Mediterranean and others where, visiting a particular spot, in this case a wetland, and trapping or calling birds to be trapped is part of their culture. So I would say there is rarely one single reason for them to do this. This is a complex environment and many reasons. And also because of this, is a big challenge for us because, every single motivation will need a specifically adapted solution. But as I said, what we have at the moment is that, generally speaking, is still happening because of all these 3-4 key reasons. I don't know if Martin or Ivana want to add to this.
You're right, Ivana. I think in the Cyprus case, when it comes to shooting, it's mostly recreation, sport. I would add the element of, machismo, in the sense that in the culture here, real men shoot birds. And that is changing a little bit, but it is a strong factor for many people. Whereas when it comes to trapping, it is clearly a profit thing. There's a cultural element. There's people who think of it as being a key part of the Cyprus tradition, but it's hugely profitable. A few years ago, before we began to really have an impact on the levels of trapping, the relevant authority was reporting to a parliamentary committee that the total value of trapping was around 15 million euros a year. It's a lot of money. this delicacy that things like blackcaps end up being served up as in restaurants. A plate of blackcaps is worth up to 60 euros. It's illegal, but it's highly lucrative. So money is a huge part of it. That's not so true for the shooting, but the trapping, definitely.
Great. Ivana?
Yes, thanks. If I can say from the Neretva Delta perspective and coots, so they illegally kill coots also as part of their tradition. I mean, coots are huntable species, so you can shoot them, but the way they do it, it's illegal. So they do it for sports and as part of a tradition, but they also shoot coots and then sell them to restaurants, local restaurants. So there is a demand for coot locally. And this is mostly done by locals. So it's not hunting tourism in question or something like that. It's really a local activity.
Great. So let's move on to a very interesting point that Ricky Donner is actually making about working with legal hunters. And then we'll dive into awareness and the role that education and tourist non-residents play. But let's talk a little bit about working with hunters. Have we done that? It has proven effective in some areas. Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, let's do this way. I give you the overall picture, and then I'm sure that Martin and Ivana can give a local example. Well, the answer is yes, we have worked with the hunters, and we need to work with the hunters, and we hope that we will continue to work with the hunters. Because I really want to make this difference in between illegal killing, illegal, and then legal hunting. And let me say, of course, I'm a biologist, I am head of conservation. It's not that I enjoy hunting, but there is something to be said about those who are following the rules and are obeying them. And this sector, this part of the community needs to be working with us, needs to be hand by hand with us, because any situation that you tackle in the world about conservation needs, an integrated approach. So answering your question, yes. I mean, in the particular case of our region, the Federation of Hunters, the European Federation of Hunters, but this is equally the case in Africa, in Asia, and in other parts of the world, are working with BirdLife International. We are working at different levels, from policy levels to action on the ground. That would be agreeing on position papers, agreeing on policy changes that need to happen. I mean, we recently had a situation with, for example, lead shot in wetlands, which is something that came really recently to the European Union. It has been banned now, so hunters cannot use lead shot. Some of the hunters are unhappy about this, but the truth is that others are happy about the measure. We are reducing the poisoning caused by lead in wetlands. And this is the way to go. Likewise, I think the hunting community is the first one interested in, in targeting those that are not obeying the rules. And Ivana and Martin can mention that from the local scenarios. But just let me insist on this. I mean, we need to work together. This is the only solution. And I am glad to say that, from the really high level to, global international organizations to EU, to governments level, I mean, there is communication. There needs to be this communication.
Yeah. Cool.
I'll let Ivana go first this time.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for this question. It's a really great question, and I'm happy that I get the chance to speak about this more. So we as an organization want to work with ethical hunters. Like Ivan said, it's really important to distinguish illegal hunting and hunting. And we acknowledge that we need more activities focused on collaborating with hunters. In Neretva Delta, we did collaborate with hunters at the beginning. As I said, we invited them to a workshop where we discussed this problem, and they were actually interested for us to solve this problem. But as I said, they backed up and said, this is happening in protected areas. You need to work with public institutions, police inspections. But once we actually did our anti-poaching activities with these institutions, we did get anger from the hunting community. They were angry with us, with the public institution. They even talked to local mayors about us going into the reserve and doing this, although they do not manage the reserve. The public institution, which was doing the work with us did it. So now we are actually targeting in Neretva Delta, because this is an ongoing project. We are targeting individual hunters who are willing to cooperate with us, and we want to talk to them to get their perspective about all of this anti-poaching work we are doing. But in other parts of Croatia, which I didn't speak about today, we are collaborating with hunters and tackling, for example, quail poaching with them. But we always we collaborate with hunters on many other projects, like which are targeted at lynx conservation. And then these same hunters who are helping us with lynx conservation, then we try to talk to them about illegal killing of birds. So let's say that you know, a conversation starter with them is something else, and then we talk about also illegal killing of birds. So this proved to us to be, you know, the entry point into the hunting community and cooperating with them.
Great, thank you, Martin.
I mean, I agree with Iván and Ivana, of course, and it's a really good question. And of course, we need to work with hunters. But boy, it's difficult. I mean, it is difficult. It really is. You know, I mean, we are making an effort now with the Hunting Federation, because there's a new leadership that seems to be much more progressive than previous leaderships. But historically, our relationship has not been good. I'm being really honest here. We are making a big effort. We work with them on other projects. Like, for example, we have a project to save the griffon vulture in Cyprus now, which is focusing on trying to stop the use of illegal poison baits. And on a local level, we're working with some hunter communities on that. What we haven't managed to break is the problem of actually getting engagement and constructive engagement at a national level with the hunters. But yeah, it's really important, because it is the way forward. And of course, we need to differentiate between legal, sustainable hunting and illegal shooting. But you know, it's a very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive topic culturally, so it needs careful handling. So a good challenge, a good challenge.
Can I drop a question that came from Tim about the impact of legitimate hunting? Iván, I don't know if we actually, when we did the analysis in the Mediterranean, we were looking at the impact of illegal hunting, but have we actually analyzed the impact of legal hunting as well?
Not really. And the reason for this is that data sources are always difficult to get hold of, but it is definitely on, let's say, on our top priority list. I mean, depends on the region that you're addressing. So for example, in the particular case of the European Union, you do have, to an extent, some hunting bag statistics that you can use to understand the impact of legal hunting. Now, we would need another 2 webinars to discuss whether or not we believe that this data is truly accurate, and what are the things that we think we need to change in order to make them more accurate. But that cascades into a whole list of responsibilities from member states, in the particular case of the European Union, but also for, you know, in other cases for signatories of CMS, Ramsar, Iowa, etc. It is very difficult to understand the legal impact of legal hunting, the overall impact of legal hunting. But I would say that this is actually what we need to complete the picture. I mean, we know already that 25 million birds per year is a shocking figure only in the Mediterranean. If you put on top of that the legal quotas, you can understand that, you know, we're talking about sheer size of impact to migratory populations. And it is difficult. I'm not saying that it's easy to understand this, but well, it's our next challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's move into something that is incredibly important to make sure that we clarify how we work, because there's a question about making sure that we are not marginalizing groups that are dependent on birds for food. And how do we work about this? And I just want to put a plug right now. We will have another webinar coming up the 15th of April to talk about illegal killing of birds in countries like Malta, but also bringing in some of our partners in Asia, where the dependence of wild birds for food for local communities is even higher. But how do we engage with local communities, make sure that we are not marginalizing them even more if they are depending on this for their food? Who wants to go first? Ivana, why don't you go first?
Okay, thank you for the question. So from our stakeholder workshops, okay, we've been working on this topic for the last 5 years, 6 years, so it's a bit new to us, but from our stakeholder workshops, it's not the case in Neretva Delta that people are hunting hoods because that's the only source of their food. But I think we definitely need to, we try to change behaviors with our actions, and we really need to also think about socioeconomic, investigations that we need to do in these areas. We actually have one planned for the Neretva Delta area for this year. It will be the first socioeconomic research BIOM will do. And I hope we'll get really great insight from local people. What are actually the real motivations behind poaching in the area? Because we can, just say based on the stakeholder workshops why people are doing it, based on talks we are having with the local community, but we don't have actually scientific data backing that up. And I hope that from that socioeconomic research, we will also get really good insight into, how to position our activities to really change people behaviors there. So, yeah, I hope that partially answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's very good. Martin, you want to add, or Iván?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is very brief from Cyprus. Food has not been an issue or a reason for hunting for the last 50 years at least. And we're a very affluent country. People are very well fed. That's not a reason to do it. I mean, people do make a lot of money out of poaching, but that's a different thing. People make money out of selling drugs as well, and I support that. But food, in short, is not a reason or a need in that sense for hunting.
Can I just say quickly, Patricia, that what we are seeing in Europe is that true, food is not an issue. Cultural tradition is a big issue, and to some extent, we have to be really aware of not marginalizing those communities as well. I mean, and you see this from Norway, where there's the tradition of taking chicks of gannets, to Macaronesia in the Canaries with chicks of other birds, to places like I don't know, in Turkey or in Greece, where traditionally there was this. We have to be cautious about this, because yes, maybe there is no need for protein, maybe there is no need for food, but it's still something that is really inside of people's mentalities and culture. And the only way out of that is, well, first of all, exposing the problem, telling them that what they think is a cultural tradition is having an impact on the population of these species, and we could actually be losing these species, but also providing alternatives. And the alternatives can be as simple as, promoting bird tourist visits, ornithological trips, capacity building for them to actually be in the wardens of those sites. And those things actually work. But I mean, sometimes I think it's important not to lose this perspective, because sometimes we tend to believe, well, in Europe, this is the different scenario. Well, actually, it's still something that it's really inside us for those communities that are really, living this for generations, and something that we really need to study.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about awareness and how education and working with local communities can change that. But before we do that, I do want to make sure that everybody is aware that the situation that we have in Europe is not necessarily the situation in the rest of the world. There are still countries where communities do depend on birds for food. It is about sustainable harvesting and making sure that we are maintaining these species still, recovering. So yes, there are countries where people still depend on birds and other wildlife for food. So we have to be careful about that. And BirdLife partners all over the world. And because we are a network of national conservation organizations, we are incredibly attuned to the realities and the cultural values and cultural needs that people have in each of these countries. So yes, stay tuned and do come to the April 15 webinar, because we will be talking from other perspectives from other parts of the world. Let's talk about awareness and the role that awareness and education play. And Ivana, you gave lovely, you made very important points about engaging with local communities and engaging with children and making them value birds alive. Tell us a bit more, and then Martin, maybe we can talk a little bit more about Cyprus and the role of awareness in the wetland. and how important it is to get the local communities behind you and understanding what the problems are.
Okay, so let me start. Thank you again for the question. And yes, like Iván said, it's very, very important to also have this aspect of engaging with the local community if we really want to change behaviors. So we don't do just monitoring of illegal killing of birds and capacity building of law enforcement officers. We also engage with the local community there. We actually do have a person that is employed in the Neretva Delta area who engages with the local community. So it's not someone coming from the outside, but who is already within the community. And we do have a lot of educational workshops for children on very different topics. And we just try to, for them to have, a positive view on these birds. And we talk to them about bird migration and taking care of your community and nature around you. So maybe, we talk to the children about the more positive topics. For adults, for example, we have like this bird identification course, which we have each year, where we round interesting public and have like a 3-week course with them on identifying birds around them. So it's really, really important to engage the local community. We also do not only awareness raising, but education of law enforcement officers, as I say. So we really, a holistic approach is needed to really tackle this issue.
Great. Martin?
Yeah, education is something and awareness raising is something we're investing more and more time in. A couple of years ago, we actually hired a full-time education officer for the first time. Lots of school work. Okay, COVID has got in the way a bit, but as soon as we can, we'll be back on it. As Ivana said, it's simple, positive messages with the young, just trying to link them back to nature. It really doesn't take much. In my experience, there isn't a child that isn't interested when you show them a spur-winged lapwing through the telescope. And sites like the one in the background here, which is Agrodiri Marsh, part of the Agrodiri wetland complex, would have been restored by the cows that you can just about see grazing there. They've become real attractions for local families. It's very hard to go there and do a quiet morning's bird watching anymore, because there's all these wonderful families enjoying the site, the cows, and the birds there. And Oroglini Marsh, as I mentioned in my presentation, the local community has really enjoyed the fact that there's 2 hides there, and they're absolutely on the local tourist map. Families there all the time. Events we do there are so popular. Not only is it a really enjoyable thing to do compared to lobbying and trying to talk to hunters, things we must do, but it is such an important investment going forward. And if we can catch people young, as I say, my experience is that people really enjoy it. And we've stolen the idea that Ivana mentioned from BIOM on the bird ID. We've just started that to build the next generation of bird watchers, but also bird recorders. So we're doing everything we can to reconnect people to nature. And it's a roundabout route, but a very effective route to tackle problems like illegal bird killing.
That's great. And you reminded me of a quote that I love to use. Back in the days when President Obama was leaving the White House, he interviewed David Attenborough. And in that interview, Sir David Attenborough told President Obama that he's never found, and one of the things that has wondered him always is that he's never found one child anywhere in the world who's not marveled by nature. And it's not only about telescopes and binoculars and making them watch birds, but it's actually seeing, nature just firsthand. It actually, and cultivating that is incredibly important so we don't get more disconnected to nature. All right, let's move gears 1 second and let's talk about legality. So there are a couple of questions from Eva Lisa and a couple of others about legal systems and why is it that governments are not putting this in place. And so before I push this on to you guys, let me just remind everybody that not every single country has hunting laws. Not every country has actually determined hunting quotas. There's still a lot of countries that even when they have legal systems, they don't enforce them. And I just wanted to mention and it is really an uphill battle in some cases, because even in countries where we have been able to convince the national governments that it is important to set up hunting quotas and put some order into the hunting, like Lebanon, for example, and the Lebanese partner has been actively working with the presidency on making sure that there is a very strong and clear hunting law. The enforcement is not there. And it's kind of like baby steps sometimes. We managed to get the legislation in only 3 years ago, but we're still seeing masses of illegal hunting that is happening. So let's go into you guys. You guys are in the field and on the ground, and you are dealing with the law enforcement teams. How is it working? Are the legal systems enough? And are we working on strengthening them, or are we working on the enforcement? And then we'll talk a little bit about technology and monitoring. Who wants to start?
Again, let me just give you the overall picture, but I think you already mentioned, Patricia, the key issues. I think that the first thing that we need to ensure is that countries are aware of the problem, and then that there is policy in place that allows them to act. Because we sometimes have come across scenarios where the government officials will come to us and say, wow, I'm shocked, I didn't know about this, but actually I do not have any kind of proper frameworks that I can use to chase these offenders. And this is the case, maybe less so in some parts of the world, but definitely in others. So we are working at policy level with different, international conventions to make sure that they develop things such as national plans against illegal killing, for example, or following, the Tunis Action Plan, for example, against illegal killing, working with illegal killing task force, and then providing capacity. I will just leave the ground to Ivana and Martin, but I think one of the beauties of BirdLife International, of our system, is that we are able to share expertise and to train people that maybe is really keen, like our colleagues in Croatia, who has got a lot of experience, but can actually export that knowledge to colleagues, elsewhere in the world. And I think that actually this is happening. But I leave it to Ivana and Martin.
Ivana, ladies first.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so concerning the laws in Croatia are actually great. Everything we want, almost everything is there written in the law. Of course, we as an NGO are a watchdog organization, and we get involved every time a new law is being passed or changes happen. We watch out for this, and then if we see the need, we advocate if some changes are harmful to nature or to birds. But essentially, let's say that the laws are there, they are written good, but they are not being implemented. And I think it's always the answer everywhere, that the laws, at least in Europe, that the laws are good, but they are not being implemented. So why enforcement doesn't work? It doesn't work because of many things. For example, we actually did police training on a national level, and we had a survey with 400 police officers nationwide about what is the main obstacle for them to tackle illegal killing of birds. And their answers were from that they are not educated on the topic, that the public is not educated on the topic and is not, calling the police when they see poaching happening. That they are not equipped well enough. So, for example, the police in Neretva Delta, they do not have a boat, and they have to patrol, the area where poaching happens on the sea or in the reed beds. So they actually have to, rent a boat, and when they rent a boat, the poachers know it immediately. So actually, the enforcement is not working at the moment.
Martin?
Well, in Cyprus, the laws are good for the most part, but then there are relaxations that really cut into the deterrent value of fines on things like lime sticks, because of the strong cultural element, and because a lot of our members of parliament get their votes from areas where that cultural element is felt very keenly. So that's a struggle we have. Nonetheless, it's illegal, and it has been illegal since 1974 in Cyprus. And as Ivana and Ivana were saying, the key issue is implementation. What we found makes the difference is, well, basically shaming the authorities, getting it into the media, both locally but internationally. And in that context, BirdLife partners and the partnership have been really useful. That has made a difference, but also working on the ground with enforcers and providing solutions. For example, the RSPB Investigations Unit has done some fantastic work in Cyprus with the local police and shown them that they can get results where they were finding it very difficult to get results. So the combination of building political will the nasty way, but also helping and acknowledging it when police do have good results, publicizing the good news as well as the bad news, can make the difference.
Yeah, and we're still, and the challenge is rolling out good legislation down to other countries where that legislation is not even written yet. Let's talk a little bit about monitoring and technology. There's a really interesting question from Canada about the use of drones for monitoring. And Ivana, you were saying, the patrollers don't have boats to get into the reeds and to get into the river and then even in the mouth of the sea. Have we thought about and have we used this? And maybe, Iván, we can go after that to you and check on what other partners are using. But drones, that sounds really good.
Thanks for the question about technology. So we did use drones in the Neretva Delta area, but not for poaching monitoring when it happens. We used it during the day just to film the poaching ponds to get better view of them and how many poaching hides do they have on them. We of course use these photos for our lobbying activities. We send them to the inspection, to the ministry. Look, the problem is really there. Their legal infrastructure is there. But we didn't use it for poaching monitoring because poaching in Neretva Delta happens during night. And to be honest, we are a bit afraid what would happen to our drone if we would, fly over the poaching ponds while illegal shots are there. But we monitor illegal killing of birds in Neretva Delta area from vantage points from which we can see the reed beds and the coastal sea. And we basically, listen to how many shots were heard, and we always want our safety to be first. So we are actually really, we are not in the vicinity of the poachers.
Great. Iván, do we know if other partners are using drones or other technology?
I know that they have used them, although there are some limitations, as Ivana was saying. I know that in some cases, but mostly linked to monitoring, for example, at cliffs, they've been used in the past, but mostly as a way of understanding what is the general state, let's say, of the colony or the area, more than to trying to see on the spot the poachers, let's say. What I can add to this is that we do have some published guidance, and if you want, I can post it here on the chat, on the techniques and the methods that we recommend to be used for monitoring and surveying the illegal killing of birds. My colleagues here can mention, but definitely I would say that in terms of the direct measures, it's basically either visible or undercover monitoring. I would say undercover monitoring is probably the one that most of our partners will do, and we have great examples, well, from here, but also from other places in Malta and elsewhere. Because we need to, one of the key challenges I would say is that we really need the evidence. Without the evidence, the legal enforcement agencies will not be able to act. Drones are a bit noisy so far, so that's the main reason. But camera traps and undercover surveillance is used. I won't reveal all the methods, but definitely something that we need to do to monitor this.
Great.
Can I just briefly add, Patricia, that in Cyprus with camera traps, undercover cameras, we've had some great enforcement results, and the police have also used drones in their enforcement work, and it's actually worked quite well as a deterrent as well. So we haven't used it for monitoring, but we have actually funded them, thanks to other funders, to buy some drones for their enforcement. So technology definitely has a role to play. The monitoring we do, the results of which you saw in that chart, doesn't involve technology. We just go and check sites, and it works very well, because with mist netting you can see evidence of trapping. That's not true for all the illegal activities. But in terms of enforcement, yeah, it can really make a difference, and it can be a fantastic deterrent for trappers.
Yeah, and I think it could also make the monitoring cheaper and more accessible, specifically to areas that are really hard to get to. All right, one more turn. I'm sorry, I've been taking you all over, but they're really good questions. So you both come from countries that are incredibly important for tourism. Not necessarily last year, but you know, historically. And there's a question about the role that tourists and non-residents can play on this, but also a really good question from Ray. And there's a really good question from Rob about potentially using tourism bans on not visiting countries that have a problem with illegal hunting, while others are advocating for, on the contrary, visit countries to show the value of birds and to show the value of bird watching. So let's talk about the role of tourists, non-residents, and tourism as an opportunity to educate people about the value of birds, or potentially deter them from pushing illegal killing. Martin.
Can I be rude and go first? So
Please.
This morning I was in a meeting with the tourism ministry here, pushing hard because they're just beginning to understand that this is a tourism area that they failed to exploit, and making the point that if you want to draw tourists to come to walk in nature or birdwatch in Cyprus, you have to protect sites. Paralimni Lake has to be somewhere people can visit, well, not dodging rubbish and finding illegal hunters in front of them. So it's an important tool to get that. It's a very important tool to get enforcement against illegal bird killing, because Cyprus has over the years been losing so much potential tourism, wildlife tourism, because of the illegal killing problem, and quite rightly. But to address the issue of bans, no, please, don't stay away. If you stay away, no one knows you've stayed away. If you come here and people see you with your binoculars and you talk to locals and say, oh yeah, I came to see birds and I went to this site and it was fantastic, that can make the difference. And it also, it's an economic answer. You know, there's so much money to be made out of killing birds. There is also a lot of money to be made, especially in places like Cyprus that are easy to get to and easy for visitors, from protecting nature. It can play a huge role, but ban, no, please, that really doesn't help. We go to the bird fair whenever we can, obviously not last year, to promote Cyprus, because we really think this is part of the solution going forward.
I agree. Ivana, you want to jump in?
Yes, I mean, we also always advocate that, you know, a lot of money can be made from this bird watching tourism perspective. And we always say that poaching and tourism don't go hand in hand. The thing in Neretva Delta is, which was one of the most shocking things for me, after these poachers started getting caught there, they actually burned down some infrastructure for birdwatching tourism. But then this also provoked, you know, a reaction from the police when they really said, okay, they can't burn down infrastructure. We really have to step up and catch them even more. So this was beneficial on the one side, but yeah, I mean, I think the tourists are also very unaware about the amount of poaching that's going on, because the tourist season is in summer and the bird poaching mostly happens during winter. So yeah, when they come to Neretva Delta, they are actually completely unaware of what is happening there in the winter months.
Yeah, and a huge element of working with the tourism companies to raise the awareness of this. And Naveg is saying we should encourage using cameras to shoot birds instead of rifles. Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's circle back to wetland conservation, where we started, and the role that wetland and habitat management of wetlands plays an absolutely key role to protect these populations, but also to enable us to bring them back. So there was a question about how to stop encroachment and poaching. And Martin, you talked a little bit about development and the role of proper planning. Tell us a little bit more about wetland conservation per se, in encroachment and poaching management, but also, and then we will talk a little bit about restoration, if we can.
Yeah, I mean, development is a huge and ever-present threat, at least in Cyprus. It's a very difficult one to tackle. One issue I didn't touch on when talking about Paralimni was that actually 90% of the lake is privately owned. And the owners are saying to the government that if you want to protect this as a wetland, because our vision is to fill it in and build on it, then you have to compensate us. And this is a real sticking point, because the government was, by the way, close to compensating them until the financial crisis came along. We just missed that one, which was really bad luck. But of course, the value estimations differ. But that's a particular problem for for Paralimni, as well as the encroaching development everywhere. I think the answer, and what we've seen works in the case of Oroklini, just down the road from Paralimni, is to preserve the wetland, to manage it, to put in infrastructure for visitors. Yes, to get across the message that it is protected, so no, you can't build on it, but not so much that negative, more the positive gains that can come from it. And in that situation, again, in a community that's a really growing community, expanding rapidly, we've seen a complete sea change from one where they saw the wetland as a problem, something they wanted to fill in and build on, to something they really love and appreciate. It's not always that easy because, you know, the development pressure is huge. So we do rely on the government, we rely on Brussels to strictly enforce the regulations that need to be in place and the practices that need to be in place when it comes to Natura 2000 sites. So it's a carrot and stick thing, and I can't pretend that it's easy. It's a constant challenge for wetlands in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. Iván or Ivana, do you guys want to add?
Can I quickly just say that in terms of restoring wetlands as a whole, I mean, we've been talking about one of the threats, illegal killing for sure, but I just want to call the attention to a couple of things. Again, using maybe the example of the Mediterranean, but we all know about, you know, the Paris Agreement and the global warming issue, and if we reach 2+ degrees, then it's really bad for our ecosystems. Where in the Mediterranean, the models say that we are going to increase by 3.8 degrees by 2000 well, in about 80 years from now. Let's put it this way. Wetlands are our basically our best chance to buffering that impact. So when we talk about restoring wetlands, we are talking about ways to, well, basically try to accommodate for that impact that is going to be caused by sea level rising, by the destruction of the habitats, by species that are going to be suffering. Protecting wetlands is much more than protecting the particular species of birds or fish that are endemic to that, but actually is protecting us. And without that, we will be doomed. So I just want to make this call, because for me, one of the beauties of wetlands is that they are buffering zones. They are areas that we are all really close culturally, you know. They are also amazing places to connect amongst different, you know, places, countries, cultural backgrounds. They are stopover sites for so many species that connects us all. So whenever we are seeing a wetland, we are seeing a bit of another country, of another continent, and this is why we need to preserve them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a huge role that restoration of wetlands is going to play, particularly right now when we're talking about reigniting economies after the COVID pandemic, and the opportunity of really protecting and restoring these extraordinary sites that are not only really important points for migratory and resident birds, but especially for producing incredible ecosystem services for our own survival. And someone was talking about how a lot of these areas are going to be flooded in the future, which is not necessarily good news for nature also. I mean, that could be a deterrent for development in some cases, but we also have to remember that these are home for incredible species that if we don't figure out ways of adapting them to the changes that the climate is posing on them, we're going to lose them as well. So let's make sure that we keep that in mind. All right, you guys have been extraordinary, and there have been fantastic questions coming from everybody. I want to give you one last minute to send a final message before we jump into our plans and the support that we need. So Ivana, last wisdom.
Take care of your wetlands wherever you are from, and I mean, what to say after Ivan's such poetic description about wetlands. But yeah, I mean, thank you very much for joining this webinar and for me to have a chance to present one wetland in Croatia. That's very, very important, and we're not giving up on it. We're still working with the local community there, and yeah, check our website for any news on Neretva Delta.
Thank you. Martin.
I can't get close to the excellent words that Ivana and Iván have said. They've captured it all. It's been really good. I think the questions, and I had time to look at some of the other ones we didn't even manage to answer, have been really good. And it's been a great discussion. I think valuing wetlands, as everyone said, is absolutely key. And I think from a Cyprus perspective, to those of you who haven't visited wetlands in Cyprus, do come and visit them, because that can be part of the solution, definitely. And thank you all for being part of this effort. It really does, when you come from a small country with a lot of challenges, it really helps to be part of a partnership and to feel that you're supported by a bigger whole in these efforts. So thank you very much for that.
And you both are extraordinary representation of what this wonderful family of organizations is. So thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your extraordinary expertise and your wisdom. We had over 180 people on this webinar at some point. All right, now, let me switch gears one last time. I want to remind everybody that we could not be doing any of this without your support. We are launching our appeal on stopping the illegal killing of birds across the world. It's something that we are very passionate about and that we see an incredible role for all of you to play. So consider the possibility of supporting us. That's the website, donorbox.org/IKB. And do join us on the 15th of April when we will have our new webinar following on the topic of illegal killing, but this time bringing in some expertise from Asia, in addition to one of the big hotspots for hunting, Malta. So it's going to be another fabulous conversation with two, maybe even three members of the BirdLife family talking about all of our role and work, tireless work, trying to get the illegal putting an end to the illegal killing of birds. So please join us, please support us. Your support goes to these fantastic people like Martin and Ivana and the partners around the world who are helping us stop the mass slaughter of birds, not only migratory birds, but resident birds in many cases as well. And I would like to thank both of you and Iván for being such a fantastic champions of nature, champions of birds, champions of wetlands, and for helping us raise awareness. It is important to tell people and let people know about what's happening with our birds and our wetlands, and share all the extraordinary hopeful solutions that you guys are sharing, because I think the conservation community tends to be very negative always, and we don't share all of these extraordinary stories of hope that we have. It's been a pleasure to be with all of you. Thank you so much for all the fantastic questions. And thanks to you guys for being such extraordinary speakers. We will see you on the 15th of April. Join us. And if you can, definitely support us. Good.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much. Yes.